For years, we've been told that this ISO 20022 thing is going to change everything. It's going to modernize payments. It's feature rich. It's data rich. And I've honestly had trouble really believing that. I think today that's going to change.
Welcome in, everybody. You're listening to Wrestling Payments, a podcast where we help payment professionals contend with the challenges of modernizing their payments operations and identifying ways to build for the future. If you're interested in payments innovation and modernization, you're in the right place. Now, let's get into it.
Today, I'm going to introduce another new model to Wrestling Payments. I'm sorry I've been gone for a little while. We've had some technical issues and I think they're resolved now, but we'll see. And today I'm going to do a news style like presentation. And it's a really important topic. It's more than important. I think it's it's one of those moments where you say to yourself, that's game changing. Could be wrong. Love your opinions if you disagree. But today I thought I would have breaking news and I waited a day and it's no longer breaking news. It's all over the place. We're going to talk about what the Federal Reserve just dropped. It's one of the proposed rulemaking. They're got a 60-day release on a rule that they're planning to implement. And that rule is an adjustment to Reg J. You may say to yourself, well, what are you talking about, Joe? I don't know what an adjustment to Reg J is. Well, part of Reg J was changed to allow FedNow to operate and settle. They're looking at changing it, and they're looking at changing it to designate intermediary banks, opening the door for cross-border payments over FedNow for the first time. Now, it is not going to be an international payment. It will enable them. And I have a lot of notes here. I thought I could do a combination of weekend update and a real news report. Let's see how that goes. These are not minor tweaks. It's not a minor, we're going to increase the dollar limit or we're going to maybe add a new feature. I think these are pretty game changing. But again, you decide. My first thought of this, I'm an ACH guy, as you know. My first thought of this is this IAT for FedNow? And if you don't know, ACH has an international payment. It also does not leave the country as an ACH transaction, but it does enable information to be exchanged. So let's talk about this. When the Fed launched FedNow, and you'll see this in the press release from the Federal Reserve, I will share that link. They said up front, we're going to start with domestic only. That's what we're going to start. But they said later on, we would evaluate cross-border. We're here. We're at the rules for cross-border. And I'm going to explain everything. I had a lot of questions. I worked through all my questions, and I'm hoping to share that with you right now. So if you're a participant in FedNow, you now have a new use case that you could start working on. They're looking for responses to the proposed rule. So it's a great time to say, yes, we like this, but no, we don't like this, and give you feedback. They read them all. They work on them. So my next section is, what does the rule actually change? Today, FedNow payments can only involve two banks. And if you look at the model, it really is a bank to bank or financial institution to financial institution model. It doesn't include the end parties, right? You as a participant in FedNow enable the end parties. You enable an app, a tool, a website, a login, whatever you enable that to send a transaction. The FedNow itself is financial institution to financial institution, beginning and end. There are no intermediaries. There are no pass-through entities. This changes that, right? This works great for domestic, right? Because a domestic payment goes from an institution in the U.S. to another institution in the U.S., but it makes international impossible because there's no way to route them through a correspondent bank, right? If you're familiar with international payments at all, there is an entity called an intermediary bank that has enabled a cross-border payment. That could be enabled because they've entered into a contract with a party in another state, country, where they send the payments back and forth between each other. They're a correspondent. The proposed rule change, and it's an odd name to the rule change because Regulation J started as check. So the introduction to the change starts as changes to checks via FedNow that allow them international cross-border. And you might read that quickly and say, what are you talking about? So let's keep going. So let's give an example, right? How would this actually work, right? And why is this an ISO use case that changes everything? So how does this work? And I asked this question. I use AI. I asked this question of my AI. It understands FedNow. It knows what FedNow is, knows how it works. I said, why can't you do this today, right? Why isn't it possible to do it today? Say, and we'll use Big Bank as the name of the bank that has the contacts to send overseas, to send cross-border. So say you send a payment to Big Bank with an instruction, a letter or an email or something that says, hey, when you get that, once it's settled, can you send that to our partner in Mexico, Spain, England, wherever you want to send it? And they'll do that, right? So in essence, you could send a FedNow payment that will become an international payment. There's a delay. There's a process. FedNow would settle the transaction instantly in the master account, and then it would route the payment overseas as a different transaction. With the rule change, this becomes one end-to-end coherent transfer. It becomes one transfer. They don't have to say, stop, here's another instruction. The instructions are embedded in the FedNow message, not two separate transactions, which is super interesting. It takes a little bit. If you're not completely familiar with international payments, it takes a little bit to understand that. But this may be ISO 20022's moment. Let me see my note. I have been waiting. So here, my note says, it's AI talk. So my note says, okay, this is the part I'm most excited about. I'll be honest. I've been waiting for a real tangible example of ISO 20022. I have been. There are lots of things that are said along the way, along the journey of payments. And one of the things said along the journey to payments is ISO is going to change it all. It's feature rich. It's data rich. You're going to be able to send transactions. I haven't seen it. I really haven't seen it. As I did in the opener, I haven't seen it. This is a use of that. And I know I'm going to ruin my presentation. This is my script. And I told my AI, I'm not really good with scripts. Can you give me a Joe script that isn't a script? This is close to a script. Here's where I'm going to ruin it first. What we've seen in the past year is Swift, FedWire, chips, and we have RTP and we have FedNow, all operating not on the same, it is not the same version, but they're all operating on ISO 20022. It is not a heavy lift to include a message coded as a PAX 008. If you're not familiar with a PAX 008, you should be familiar with a PAX 008. It is the credit transfer in FedNow. It is the credit transfer in RTP. It is the credit transfer in FedWire. It is called the PAX payment schema PAX 008. They have in its origin the correct pieces that need to be transmitted. So it's not a big lift. The big lift here is that Reg J had to be updated to allow for the movement of this. And the redesignation, when you send this payment, the U.S. institution, Big Bank, is no longer the receiving participant. The receiving participant is overseas. They're the financial institution that is the cross-border debtor that's going to get the payment. And they follow the rules for an intermediary bank, which are different than a receiving bank. So they can pass that transfer right along. FedNow speaks ISO 20022. This section is called ISO 20022 Change the Game here. FedNow speaks ISO 20022. Oh, here it is. Swift speaks ISO 20022. FedWire speaks ISO 20022. All the data fields are the same. There are, I don't know, it's almost like an accent, right? FedNow has its own accent, right? There's a couple of little tweaks that's how FedNow works. RTP has its own accent. It's probably a Brooklyn accent, but it has its own accent. I have a comparison here too, because that's where I started. I started with, wait a minute, does FedNow have now an IAT transaction? So we can compare it to the IAT. The thing it says here, and as an ACH guy, I'm a little tiny bit offended, but it's not wrong. With the ACH IAT, it is cramming information into specific addenda records, right? So there's the 710 record, right? The specific type of addenda record that contains the who's sending the money. Then there's a record for who's the financial institution sending the money. Then it has a record for who's the institution receiving. It's all kind of jammed in there. With the ISO 20022 record, it gives you more room to be able to say, here's all the parties along the way. There is a big, so that the downside or the warning signs we talk about in one segment. So there are warning signs and things to be aware of. And as a note, I should have said this at the beginning. These are all my opinions. These are not the opinions of Nietzsche. These are not the opinions of any of the network people. This is my opinion on things. All right, what's the competitive angle? This now makes FedNow a direct competitor with FedWire for international payments. Fascinating, right? And it's 24/7, 365. Cross-border payments initiated on a Saturday night. Domestic leg settles in seconds over FedNow. Try that with FedWire. Ooh, that's a little mean. We like you, FedWire. For strategic planners, this kind of capability that should be in your 3-year roadmap conversations right now. And I don't know if I mention it here, but if you are a FedNow participant and you're a receive-only participant and you're looking for your use case, this is now a use case. Do you have a demand for this type of transaction in your portfolio? Maybe this may be the use case for you. All right, here's the downside. Here's the negative. Here's the things we have to worry about, right? And I've it feels like I've been training faster payments for a really long time because we finished last year. I finished a enrollment in the AFPP training, the accredited faster payment professional training, did a bunch of modules for that. We're now training on the FedNow rules and the RTP rules. So it feels like I've been talking about this forever. And again, my own opinions. Nowhere in the rules, either FedNow or RTP, does it say you must have a real-time BSA AML program. It doesn't say it in the rules. That's my statement. That's where I'm standing. If you can show me where it does say it in the rules, I'm happy to be wrong. I never have a problem being wrong. Happy to be wrong. Teach me, show me. So what does that mean for BSA? Now you're talking about really sending international transactions. There is a heavy lift on making sure you are not sending money to bad guys, right? You don't want to go the wrong direction against OFAC, BSA, AML screening. You do not want to be in that boat. So let me introduce that in a minute. Let me finish this statement and I'll introduce it. So when we talk about an IAT, right? The screening on an IAT is you're going to screen the transaction as you send it. If it says it's going to an international party, even though an IAT only travels domestically, it triggers enhanced OFAC and BSA screening, right? For both the sender and the receiver. Okay. The proposed FedNow rulemaking does not appear to create the equivalent explicit cross-border flag. The screening, and this little foresight, the screening is going to have to take place at the beginning and at the end. And it's going to be like prime time ready. When you send that international FedNow, you have to believe that it has been screened properly. It's, big red stop sign. If that's not something you can do, these may not be for you. Next section, the news update. There's only a little bit more. We're more than halfway through. Real-time screening. Are you ready? So I did mention FedNow rules. I can't find where it says must have real-time screening. Doesn't say it. RTP rules. I can't say where it says you must have real-time screening. You have to have a screening and BSA and a compliance program in place before you ever touch any of these instant payment programs. Got to have it in place. It doesn't say it has to be real time. If you jump over to the regulators and what the regulators are looking at, they do say you really should have a real-time system in place for real-time screening of these payments. So that's where the difference is. The regulators may expect it of you. Your regulator may expect it of you. This entry settles in seconds, right? So I trained the part 1 of my FedNow rules yesterday, and I've set the timeout clock at 20 seconds. This payment from beginning to end, from initiation to settlement, takes 20 seconds. Are you ready for screening that within 20 seconds, this entry could theoretically be in a Spain financial institution at the receiver's account? Something to be concerned about, something to make sure that you have in place, something that you're comfortable with, where you believe you're meeting the requirements of your primary regulator. This definitely isn't a reason not to do it. In today's day and age, there are a lot of tools coming out that are going to allow for this process. Just have to investigate them and see if this is a business line you want to be in. Sorry, I've started reading the next line. Other operational considerations. What else do we have here? The Fed's position, it doesn't create materially new AML or sanction risk, right? Because it doesn't. You're already obligated to do this AML screening. It's not a new screening. The speed of the transaction may change how you do that, and that's really up to you and your regulator, right? Your regulator might ding you if it believes that you should be doing this real time. There's a lot of folks out there doing it, so nothing to be scared about there. It's a very fair point. My note says it's a fair point, but the speed is different, right? FedWire cross-border payments give you more processing time. FedNow does not. Sometimes AI is wrong. Let's look at this for a second, right? FedWire. From the minute the FedWire is sent, and from the minute, I guess I have to say second, from the second a FedWire is sent, and from the second a FedNow is sent, they are both real-time gross settlement payments. So I think to understand these payments, you have to understand not only the network flow, but the processes that take place in advance of the network flow. I could give you a real-time payment today's Thursday, that I tell you this must be sent at 5 p.m. tomorrow. When it gets sent, it's instant. Until then, it's not instant. So now I have a little trouble with my script here. So you certainly have to understand your flows and your processes and how these things work. Institutions will need to think about their compliance workflows. True. Their screening technology. True. And their correspondent due diligence in the context of real time. Think about it. If you, and mind you, I'm a novice at wire, but if you are using a correspondent for a wire transfer, you send them the wire information, they do their due diligence, and they forward that payment on to the Spain bank, right? That still has to all happen. It's just now going to be a little bit easier because you probably did the setup work as a FedNow transaction. They really just have to slide that over to the FedWire transaction. And again, not an expert in FedWire. ISO 20022 and ISO 20022 have to be extremely similar. Okay, one detail from the proposed rules. Funds availability, an important nuance. That's the name of my section. One detail that the strategic folks should understand is Reg J's immediate funds availability requirement only applies to the FedNow leg. So you have a sending participant, send it to an intermediary. It's no longer a receiving participant. It's it's not their transaction. They're a receiving point of it, but then it's not their transaction. That part needs to follow the timeout clock. 20 seconds, done, beginning to end. If it can't settle, it goes back, reject it. You can also reject it out of hand if you say don't want it. But if it doesn't meet the timing, it has to, on the other end, be available, just like the rules say today, for the receiving participant. But there's more. But flip it around. Inbound cross-border payments where U.S. Bank is a beneficiary bank. I didn't think of this. I was walking through all the send side FedNows. Let's talk about the receive side FedNows, where that bank is still an intermediary bank. It may become doing the sending function on an inbound transaction, but it is an intermediary bank. It's not their transaction. So, but flip it around. Inbound cross-border payments where U.S. Bank is the beneficiary bank does accept the payment order over FedNow and is obligated to make those funds available immediately. So on the receive side, once it sends those transactions, it's final, right? It's immediate, 20 seconds. That inbound wire transfer could follow those same rules. I got to go back to my AI voice. That's a powerful value proposition for receiving international payments. I hadn't actually thought of that when I was thinking of this episode, but that's a really interesting point. It can come in from a FedWire, from a SWIFT, from a CHIPS even. It can come in and travel along the FedNow rails again immediately. What's the bigger picture? So these are some of the questions I asked the script to look at. What's the bigger picture? A real-time 24/7 ISO 20022 native payment rail that can now serve as a settlement infrastructure for cross-border payments. There was not one conversation about RTP or FedNow back in the beginning. RTP started back in 2017 and FedNow is working. There was never a conversation where you would say, oh, yes, we're going to build this new system. It's going to be based on ISO 20022. Not 10 minutes later, someone would be saying, well, what about cross-border? That ISO is a cross-border model as well. Why can't they be a cross-border? And now, why can't they be cross-border? So we're looking at these new rules to allow for that. 2 years ago, FedNow was FedNow was a brand new domestic system. They've now got like 1,700 participants on the network. It becomes a foundational piece of a global payments infrastructure. And this is just the rulemaking right now. What's to say it doesn't change? It's been 2 years. Let's give it another 2 years. What's the change to say there's not another change in 2 years that alters the process again? Super, super interesting. Those are all the news-based facts. What do you need to know? Today is 4/10. Today is 4/9. So if you're listening, this is recorded on 4/9. This is actually going to be released. This proposed rulemaking is actually going to be released tomorrow, 4/10, in the Federal Register. That's when the official time clock starts. There is a 60-day time period on comments. I found out today you don't actually have to wait for the thing to be officially released. There is already a comment out there, and the comment is thumbs up. We love this. I'm not sure what industry the commenter was. I don't think it was a financial institution. I think it might have been a trader, but they were all thumbs up about this. They read all your comments. They want all your comments. They want to see if there's something that may change the rulemaking, and they could change the rulemaking, but they are looking for your feedback on this rule change. If your institution has a perspective on this, you should respond. Again, it's open to anyone who wants to respond. You can talk about the opportunity. You can talk about compliance implications. How is this, in my comments about the network procedures and rules, not saying that you must have a real-time BSA system. Maybe that's a comment that says, hey, you know what? Maybe they should make it a requirement. Not that I'm saying we want mandates and requirements, but if for instance, your folks back in the office are going to say, well, that's a heavy lift. If we don't have to do it, should we do it? What if you had to do it? Again, not mandate guy, but if that's your opinion, go to it. Would you be ready if this turned on tomorrow and you're a FedNow participant? Let's say you're even a send participant. Would you be ready for that today? Would you be ready to send your first international payment? If they gave you, here's how you format it. Here's what it looks like. Go. Would you be able to do that? Would that be something you had some appetite for? Is another department interested? I always think I'm talking to the operations folks. But if there's a treasurer on the line, is this something you'd be interested in? Maybe. Again, they want your feedback. And I say this all the time with the NACHA operating rules. When they set out a request for comment, this is a notice of possible rules making, but if they set out a request for comments, this is now the time to say, whoa, this is what's wrong with this idea, or this is why this is the greatest thing and the best use of an ISO 20022 format I've heard in the last 5 years. You are encouraged to participate. So in closing, let's see what I said here. We're watching a payments landscape evolve in real time. Look at that. Look what I did there. That's pretty cool. Literally, it says that. We are watching. It's just fantastic. I saw this come out yesterday and I said, we're still having production issues with podcasts. I am leaving here and going home and editing this episode. My first episode edited by me ever. So we're having problems, but we'll see how this works out. And I had to report on this one. I think it's fantastic. I think this is that ISO 20022 use that is like, I get it now. Look, now that they're all talking the same language with a different dialect, this is the vision. Those people in the past who said ISO is the greatest thing, they were right. It is exactly the transformation the industry's been looking for. It is exactly the thing folks been asking for from the beginning. Well, what about cross-border? Okay, here it is. It's not theoretical anymore. There's a proposed rule on the table and the comment period. And if I didn't say it, the comment period is going to run from tomorrow, April 10th, the release date of it, for 60 days. You can comment anytime in that and even now. If you want to talk about this, reach out, comment on the episode. We'll be sharing this certainly, hopefully you're listening to this now. You'll be hearing it on YouTube. There'll be a link in LinkedIn. We're still an audio podcast as well. This may be the beginning of a new era in payments where it's no longer theoretical that It's ISO. It should be international. It is. Thanks.
On behalf of Nietzsche, your trusted resource in payments, and our guests, I'd like to thank everyone for tuning into the podcast. If you've enjoyed this episode and want to hear more about payments innovation and modernization, you can find the Wrestling Payments Podcast on the podcast page of Nietzsche.org or wherever you subscribe to podcasts. Just search for Wrestling Payments in your podcast app. Thanks for listening.